Hello and welcome to The Quest on Rajya Sabha TV. I'm Rakhi Bakshi. In this show, as you know, that we keep talking to leading personalities, and each week we bring you new faces on this show. We listen to their stories, their vision and their views. And right now the guest with us is somebody who really thinks a lot about things around us. She's an environmental thinker and activist, Miss Vandana Shiva. Welcome to the show, Vandana ji.
Pleasure to be with you.
So, you know, when we are talking, I think range of issues that we're going to talk about. But right now, of course, our concerns, I mean, this whole idea of talking to emanated from the fact that right now we're seeing floods in Kashmir and things around that. So, you know, how environment is changing and how we are actually, you are making the effort through various platforms to make it correct so that people live peacefully, people live in an area, an environment which is safer for everybody. So your thoughts immediately on this also, and then we'll talk about things around.
Yeah, so the first issue really is that the ecological processes through which the climate stays stable. You know, after winter comes spring, after spring comes summer, and in the spring you don't have rainfall, then you get the monsoon. Causes the disruption of ecological processes. Because people think when they hear the word environment, they think it's something outside us. They don't realize it is the laws of nature. And these laws also work in our bodies. I was just looking this morning at the graph on respiratory problem. It's climbing exponentially in Delhi. And doctors are telling people, leave the city. You can't survive.
So you've been finding solutions for us, and you've been thinking, writing, reading, and speaking a lot about this. What is the course correction? We just look up at the state, we just look up at the authorities, and we say, do something.
Yeah. So the first is, if you need to have a course correction, you need to know what is wrong with the present course. And then you need to know who will create the course correction. Will it be the state? Will it be citizens? Will it be giant corporations who cause the problem? Or will it be a combination of public responsibility on the part of government and citizens? So the present course is devastating us, whether it's the floods of Kashmir or these untimely rains and hailstorms in springtime. They're related very clearly to what has been named scientifically as climate change. And we even have an intergovernmental panel on climate change. We have an international UN framework treaty on climate change. Scientists of the world, 2,500, work non-stop since 1988 to monitor what's the temperature of the ocean, what's happening in the world. Now, why is this climate change happening? We know the science. The science is this. The same pollution that on ground level is giving our children asthma, those same pollutants at a higher level are creating a greenhouse impact. Basically, like in greenhouses, you put plastic and the temperature increases inside because the sun's heat can come in, but it doesn't escape.
True.
That's what's happening to the planet as a whole with the buildup of what are called greenhouse gases. Those are the gases that make this gaseous layer of what behaves like a greenhouse.
So what
the first is carbon dioxide. That comes from burning fossil fuels. Coal, diesel, petrol.
So somebody would argue...
No, let me finish. The public must know.
Okay.
Because the problem is when they stay illiterate about the science, then all kinds of arguments can be made. The second big greenhouse gas is nitrogen oxide. It comes from synthetic nitrogen fertilizers used in green revolution kind agriculture. Not only is India destroying its soils, and this year is the year of soil, it is destroying its water because we are using 90% of our water to dissolve these chemicals. The plant doesn't need that kind of water. The chemicals do. But worse, we are then creating a vulnerability. Because I work with farmers through the movement of Navdanya, I checked with them just now. We were celebrating Mahila and Swaraj, and I said, were the organic fields of wheat as badly affected as the chemical? They said, no. The organic plant stood strong, just like a child with good nutrition is not as... So nitrogen oxide comes from chemical fertilizers, and the third ingredient is methane. It comes from those chicken factories. It comes from the huge dump yards of garbage we are creating. 50% of the food these days is going waste. The combination, 40% of these gases globally are coming from an industrial chemical model of agriculture.
So let's look at the whole global atmosphere and then India.
Yeah.
So how would you look at the connect or rather disconnect? I mean...
Well, the science of climate change and all these massive reports already show that India is the worst impacted today and more in the future for three reasons. Because of this huge pollution barrier, which is causing the greenhouse effect and causing climate change, and there's a warming taking place, our glaciers are melting. So the Himalayan snows are getting thinner and thinner and thinner. I work in Ladakh. I've seen 3 villages that have no water anymore because the only water source, it's a high altitude desert, the only water source is glaciers. When the glacier melts, no life. The second is when the Arctic and the Antarctic poles melt, and they are melting, and they're saying in 5 years' time, in the summer, there will be no ice in the Arctic, which is why the countries are scrambling.
Actually, and
so because of that melting of snow, the sea level is rising. India, the Bay of Bengal and the Indian Peninsula is the most impacted by sea level rise. So on the one hand, from the mountains we are driving out people. On the other hand, from the coast we are driving out people. And that means we are leaving no place for people to survive. There is an answer. And when you talk about course correction, the first course correction is for India to say, we are paying a high price. Those of you who have been historic polluters, stop this pollution and bear the responsibility of historic pollution.
And there goes the game of balance.
Exactly. But worse, India is now saying they're going to run on the same path to be polluters. And they're running with the polluters and feeling very smart that we have a new roaring India. But it's an India roaring on its own deathbed. And that is what the new policies of not acting for climate change. But the third very big issue is my research, as well as our practical work on the ground, has shown not only is chemical agriculture responsible for 40% of the atmospheric pollution and climate change, but with organic farming, and in this year of soil this should really be adopted, with organic farming, we worked out that if we were to take out what is called gigatons, which is 10 to the power 12, if we were to remove 10 gigatons of pollution from the air, we can stabilize the climate. But how do you remove carbon dioxide from the air? The only way to do it is through the recycling of carbon, by putting more carbon in the soil. And there's only one way to do it, through organic farming.
So from up to bottom, you're looking at
that. Up
to
bottom and interconnection. Yesterday, I had to leave a TV debate because exactly the topic you're discussing with me was being discussed, and the disaster management fellow says, we have a disaster management authority, we have a state level disaster management authority.
I know.
The point is, farmers are losing their crop. It's not even in your vocabulary because you were trained for a flood in the Himalaya or the coastal cyclone. You don't even realize these new disasters are taking place in new ways. And two, you've not been trained to look at the causes.
Exactly, that's my next question. Do you think when people who deal with it, I'm talking of course about the authorities or people who are sitting at those responsible positions, have to really understand the subject very well, so the right people are at the right places?
They have to. You know, you introduced me as an environmental thinker and activist, and I've done that for 40 years. But my original training is in physics, and I've done a PhD in the foundations of quantum theory. And my thesis was on how quantum theory teaches you everything is connected. Mechanical physics, Newton said everything is separated, just a particle. It's like a billiard board, shoot here, shoot there, remove this, nothing will happen. Here you take out one piece, everything collapses. The problem with the Uttarakhand flood and of Kashmir today is a double problem. On the one hand, climate change is creating these intense, untimely climate extremes, like too much rain.
That people get surprised with.
And then your development model, which is being so hugely separated, is a free hand to builders to grab anything. Everywhere you go, it could be in Rajasthan, it could be in Bhopal, it could be in the Dal Lake. They are stealing the land from the water and then building. And as a result of which, the water has no place to go. So climate change is giving you more extreme weather, and maldevelopment, which is what I wrote about in Staying Alive, is giving you a suffocation.
So these problems of development versus sustenance, I will talk about that in the next segment, but right now we're taking a very short break here. We are talking to Vandana, Shiva, and very, very major issue that we are talking here right now on the Quest on Rajya Sabha TV. Don't go away. Keep watching this very important conversation. Welcome back to the show. You're watching the Quest here on Rajya Sabha TV, and we are talking right now to Vandana. We were talking about the development versus this debate also comes up all the time, whether to go up through the development route and how to sustain on the other hand and create the right livelihood methods. So what is your take on, I mean, you've spoken a lot about it, I know that, but then the question would be, as people will say, whether we want development, we want, you know, this aspirational lives that people have today to go up, so on the progress route, or how to otherwise sustain ourselves on the
if you define any activity which is carried out thoughtlessly and without responsibility as development, like building on the drainage systems of the Dal Lake, then the consequences will be flooding, and those houses will go and your lives will go. Now, I think that's highly short-sighted and narrow-minded. If you build a house and say the house is more important, or the real estate agent's profit of selling an expensive house is more important, and the most prime properties in Kashmir are around the Dal Lake fringe, where all the land grabbing has taken place, and you say that's development, then don't cry when your lives get taken.
And happened in Uttarakhand also, and this approved.
And not only, I mean, I'm from Uttarakhand, and my ecological life began with the Chipko movement 40 years ago. More than 40 years ago, it was 1972, when the women came out and said, we are going to protect the trees by hugging them, doing a Chipko, because they saw the landslides and the forest deforestation as a connection. The government laughed at them and said, you're stopping development. Exactly the same slogans as today. 40 years of ignorance and narrow-mindedness. And then the floods came in 1978, and the government realized that what they collected as revenue from timber was very small compared to the cost they paid for the floods. We've just done a calculation for India, and the agriculture minister has written the foreword. We've shown that the same chemical agriculture that is contributing to greenhouse gases, it is 300 times more deadly in terms of destabilizing the climate than carbon dioxide, which is usually the only focus. No one looks at nitrogen oxide. Nitrogen oxide also, when it goes into the ground and water, it becomes nitrate pollution, and dead zones, fish die, marine life die, dolphins die. But in this book we've calculated that we keep saying we must have chemical agriculture for development. You know what the externality is, what is called the costs that are not counted. It's externalized. We've counted $1.2 trillion of damage to society, the suicides of farmers.
Why do you think exactly there's a lack of understanding? You are saying, you are making sense when you say all these things, and I'm sure people at the right places also understand. So why is there this overboard reactions, in the sense that, you know, you are talking about the people who should be having a life which they deserve, and the right methods then to do it. But why do you think there's a disconnect, there's a gap here?
There's three major problems why the disconnect comes up. The first is a very young and immature discipline called economics, which didn't exist before the war in the way it's become dominant, which measures only one figure called the GDP and the GNP, the growth figure. It was created during the war to mobilize resources for buying arms and for building up armies. Now, this figure should have been packed up after the war in the emergency. And it defines growth as, if you produce what you consume, you're not producing. So the woman who's making all the food of this country doesn't get counted as working or producing.
That's a very valid
The
point,
small peasant who's giving us all the food, because all farmers of India are small, they're feeding a population of 1.3 billion, their production is not counted. So the very indicator of growth is a false measure. The second thing this growth does, it leaves out everything it destroys. And that's what the women of Chipko woke us up to. That's what I'm trying to do in agriculture with this wealth per hectare, that, okay, you're saying you're having growth, but 1.2 trillion losses in terms of pollution of water, desertification, death of our pollinators, death of our birds, and nearly 291,000 farmer suicides, which have get aggravated with the recent untimely rain.
But there were readings and study that this suicide factor and other things couldn't be related. I mean,
to what?
You know, for example, this BT cotton.
It's related to distress. I also address the farmer suicides of at least 100 farmers of Bundelkhand in the last few weeks. I address the suicides of at least 20 farmers of Bengal who are potato farmers. So I'm not obsessed with BT cotton. The Monsantos who make money out of it are obsessed with it. I have consideration and compassion for my brothers who are committing suicide. If PepsiCo creates a monopoly in potato and pushes farmers into debt and distress, and in addition gives them a low price, they will commit suicide.
That's why there's a term called food politics. I mean, you know, this whole...
That's the point. I think the sad thing is, when I was, the first is our measures of economic growth are a mismeasure. We deliberately turn a blind eye to what it's costing. China's studies show that actually they're not growing. If you take the death of their rivers, their food has become so toxic, they can't eat their own food. They can't export food. Now what kind of situation is that? Where you can't drink the water, you can't eat the food. So the costs aren't counted. But the third very sad issue, and that's related to the neoliberal policies that were initiated in '91 in India, deepened with the World Trade Organization and are continuing under the new regime. So that's why I find it very funny when they say it was because of UPA policy. But UPA policy and NDA policy are identical policies.
But it's not
no
about
change.
governments. I think, and I would say the new dispensation maybe is trying, I mean, what we saw in America, this whole debate again on and trying to also create our own terms somewhere.
So, no, but you see, on the US issue, okay, on food security in WTO, we have a debate with the US. We are already talking about importing wheat right now. Why? Why are we talking about importing wheat? Worst, when it comes to nuclear issues, we say, come here. Now, this is full of double standards, but coming back to the fact that the new economic policies, and let's just call them free trade and globalization and neoliberalism, basically what they say is the state's role for public welfare will be dismantled, and the state's role as a corporate subsidizer will be increased. That's something people don't see. It's not that the state disappears. The state starts to exist in a bigger way for...
Facilitator.
So what that starts to do is prevent the government from acting for the public good.
And that's what really matters. I mean,
and as far as life is concerned, and I really feel in our vocabulary, we should stop talking of the environment and talk about life.
Very true. That's a very, very personal term that I really don't want to end, but we have to talk a lot, and we are taking another very short break here right now on the Quest on Rajya Sabha TV. But please don't go away, because we are talking, Miss Vandana Shiva is talking a lot of sense when she talks about life. So please keep watching. It's very important for you all. Welcome back to the show. You're watching The Quest. We are talking to Miss Vandana Shiva. So, you know, you talked about women, and I want to take that point also. Women and ecology is a subject that you've talked about. Stay Alive, you talked about them. How would you look at this very crucial role women are playing? Also, the whole impact of when we, you know, talk about sustainable development and women.
The first thing is that, you know, there is a very, very big urge in India to reclaim our civilization. And I totally applaud it. But what is the civilization based on? The understanding that Prakriti, which is nature, is a form of Shakti, which is the universal feminine power. That's why when I wrote Staying Alive, I was trying to make sense of why is it the women came out to defend the mountain forests? Why is it the women of Bhopal are still fighting?
Because it hurts them the most.
Exactly. That's when with my more detail, I realized basically the reason women have a partnership with nature is they're in the economy of sustenance, which is not counted. And there's powerful men in the economy of extraction of minerals, of timber, of water from rivers, and that is counted. But that is, in the ecological sense, a destructive activity. Because when you pull water out of a river and leave the river downstream dead, it's a death of a river. It's not the creation of water.
Yeah, true. One thing which really was talked about a lot, and you know, for example, when you talk about corporates, so of course are also doing something for their own livelihood, one would say, and then whole issue about GM Corps which arose, and how the government is mulling over how to go about it. Would you like to say anything?
Well, I think that's such an important issue, and I've actually just edited a new book called Seed Sovereignty and Food Security, Women in the Vanguard. And there were two reasons I did it. Because all over the world, including in India, women are defending their seed and saying the seeds will stay in our hands. They will not be the property of 5 corporations. They're saying we will not accept GMOs and toxics because our children are dying. We have women scientists, because I created a whole movement globally of women scientists called Diverse Women for Diversity. Genetic engineering is based on a very crazy idea of something called a master molecule, that ye master hai gives instruction to the rest. False idea. DNA is inert. RNA gives it instruction. So they turn everything on its head and then build an entire technology around a false science. So there's a paper in here about the fact that a genome, which is the structure of a living system, is fluid. And the women scientists understand it. Barbara McClintock understood it. Scientists here have talked about it. Very, very important paper. Monsanto sells, the biggest product it sells is something called Roundup, and it has produced GMOs called Roundup Ready GMOs. Now, two facts about this. The sales of Roundup in this country have doubled in 1 year. The World Health Organization has just announced that Roundup is a potential carcinogen.
Really, really.
A scientist in this book I've edited from MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, worked on why is autism becoming so severe in the United States. That's the graph. It's climbing.
Why do you think people in general and the commoner in this sense, I would say, they need to understand much more and they don't understand? I mean, in this whole jargon of everything around, where you have too many players and people who are playing different roles, how they should actually be getting the right...
On this, I can tell you very, very honestly, because, you know, I have worked in this field now for 30 years in the GMO field, biodiversity field. I've been an expert for the United Nations. I've been an expert for our government.
You've won several awards. Livelihood Award, of course, is one of them.
But I have personally experienced the manipulative power of corporations to silence science. They're going after WHO, which should be regulating them. They're threatening the World Health Organization. They threaten scientists. They can't get away with anything. They find some pathetic journalist. You know? Their new program was, I've never studied physics. Baba, I've studied physics. I sent my degrees of my MSc honors in particle physics. Every time they write this, I send my degrees. So there is right now such corruption in communication. And that's why I always say thank you to our Raj Sabha and Lok Sabha TV, because they're not influenced by advertising money. They're able to tell the public of this country the
That's
truth.
What we're here for. We want people to really understand things also very
clearly.
So
it's the influence of corporate money. And because I've been doing the seed saving through Navdanya, I started in '87. The companies were there saying, every year we can make $1 trillion if every farmer has to buy seed from us. And the way to force them to buy it is through patenting. And the only way to get a patent is to claim that we've made something new through genetic engineering.
Ms. Shiva, when we're talking to you through this interview, we are really talking about the people and how people deserve a right to live with dignity and peace, and that's where the concerns are. So right from whether food, whether water, whether all these, as you say, external factors which kind of pollute and corrupt, what is the way out? I mean, what are the happy signs that we should kind of
Well, the happy signs really are women keeping seed in their hands, and with it the knowledge. They're bringing a GMO rice. Our women can show that they can produce 400% more with the Sehjan ka patta of vitamin A, much, much more through your dhania and your methi. And they want to bring a GMO banana for iron.
So you're saying go local, and the buzzword
go indigenous.
Okay.
We are the oldest farming civilization of the world. Our biodiversity is the richest in the world. For 10,000 years, our women...
So bring back that, you're saying?
Not bring it back, prevent it from being lost. You know? Prevent the fact that junk food is creating obesity and diabetes among our children.
Of course, it must be really prevented.
60 lakh, I think, no, it's 60 million. India has become an epicenter of diabetes, and you know who's suffering most? Rural communities, because they're eating white rice. Now, I really call, you know, you're saying...
Somebody would say it's related to lifestyle of the upper middle class.
No, it's not a lifestyle. It is policy and denying people their option. The options are their rights. We should not hand over our seeds to corporations who then collect royalties. But second is, this land is so fertile. and yet we are repeatedly told we are unproductive. Our studies show we can produce 2 times the amount of nutrition we need.
So talking about farmers, and on which you know that it's right from the parliament to the streets, there were a lot of talk and buzz. How would you look at the farmer who really deserves his land to be tilled correctly?
Well, first of all, the land needs to stay in the hands of the farmer. It shouldn't be seen as a property to be alienated. Secondly, the woman farmer's name should be the first name in any title. We've just done a Mahila and Swaraj convention, and that was one of the demands of the women. Seeds should stay in women's hands to create community seed bank. The knowledge of women should be put first for nutrition, and every place should have a nutrition garden. Half our children are malnourished, stunted and wasted. No child needs to go hungry. If in every village there are seed banks, in every village there are community gardens, our midday meal schemes are fed with nutritious meals, and our members are doing this. They're saying, we will not feed our kids junk. We will grow the good food and get our kids to eat the good food.
But the farmers would say, and somebody would say, the agriculture growth should go up, and that's why, I mean, when we are talking about, let's say, something like a land acquisition bill, somebody would say that this is only for the welfare of all.
Well, I already mentioned earlier, the measure of growth is so false. If in grabbing the land, fertile land of the farmer, and killing the food security of this country by taking fertile land away at very speculative prices, and you call that speculation growth, and you don't count the creation of hunger because of loss of food security, the creation of poverty because attached to a farmer who has a land title are at least 10 people who depend on that farmer, whether it is to fix his plow, or it is the blacksmith, or it is the landless laborer. There is a whole community out there, which was why there was a social impact assessment, food security assessment, consent. Now, those 3 are necessary ingredients to ensure that land is used in a democratic way, sustainable way, and for the future.
What a beautiful term you have used, democracy, and that's what we should all believe in, and we should strengthen it.
Absolutely.
And I think so many issues that I really wanted to talk about.
I would add to it, earth democracy. We are the civilization of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, which means the earth family.
So the world is for all, and we are all part of this beautiful world. Thank you so much for sparing your valuable time and talking to us on Rajya Sabha TV and range of issues. In fact, we wanted to talk much more to Vandana, Shiva, but this is the time we have right now in this edition of the Quest on Rajya Sabha TV. Hope you liked watching this show and this program. Keep giving us your feedback. Thank you. Bye and namaskar.